We have, I see I have touched a nerve. We have a few more callers. I'd like to hear from our callers. Line one, Drake. Drake, good morning, and how are you?
Good morning. Thanks for taking my call.
Oh, sure. Always a pleasure, Drake. What's on your mind?
So I've got two comments I'd like to present. I have a bachelor's in architecture that I received at the University of Southern California. And while I was there for the full 5 years, the curriculum was focused on sustainable design. Everything we did, every single class we had to take, was focused on this whole idea of green building.
What does sustainable mean? Design. Sustainable means it doesn't fall down after you build it. What does sustainable mean?
Not anymore. Sustainable means you use these green products. You know, you put in the right technology that has a low carbon footprint. Using local resources instead of importing resources from other countries or other areas of the country. Nothing wrong with that necessarily, but if the market doesn't want it, then let the market do something else.
And, of course, the likelihood you're going to affect the lifespan of the snail daughter is pretty remote. So the likelihood that you will make a difference in the life of the planet, as if the planet is going to die 2 days later because you built a good, sustainable building, is pretty absurd. But tell us more about it, Drake.
Well, what I found after school is I got into the industry itself is dominated by this whole theory of sustainability and green building. I mean, the LEED certification, when I first started school...
I should mention LEED. LEED is, again, an acronym. LEED doesn't mean L-E-A-D, it's L-E-E-D, and it's an acronym which basically describes a building which is built according to a code which says it is not damaging the environment. Now, I'm being simplistic, but that's a fair summary, isn't it, Drake?
Oh, absolutely. But it's a total marketing scheme, total fallacy. When you complying to these regulations, that they're updated every year and get more and more complicated and more, regulatory.
And what about the effect on the cost of the building?
Oh, it skyrockets it.
Yeah.
It makes
Which means
it go way up. You lose a lot of design value because you spend a lot of time value engineering it so you can keep it on budget. And you end up choosing materials that really are not as durable, are not as reliable, but satisfy these LEED requirements.
So that means the tenants all bear the cost through higher rents, and the landlords bear the cost through higher real estate taxes because everything is more expensive. And this is a cost that benefits no one in particular except somebody living in the year 8032 who gets to live in a cleaner world 800,000 years later. And so this expenditure is all without benefit, and it's not market driven because you don't have a choice.
The other consequence of all this is that it makes the cost to do business go up, and so it results in fewer employment opportunities. And also, if the cost of the projects go up, then that reduces the number of projects people are willing to, commit money to. So
now, Drake, Drake, in your opinion, what is because this is always intriguing, and I'm sure it is to Mimi as well. How does, here we have a builder who really doesn't want to put in these, quote, sustainable materials. We have a tenant who could care less about it. So nobody wants it. But what is the hook? How does it happen politically that the building gets built with materials nobody wants and nobody really wants to pay for, but nobody ends up having a choice? How does it happen?
Well, you have to get permits to build buildings, and the people that give out the permits are the ones who are pushing this agenda.
Yes. So they don't bear the cost.
You can't build a building unless it's approved. And you can't get it approved unless it is green.
That's right.
And it's not green unless you do all this baloney you have to do now.
And none of that is at all responsive to the market.
Of course not.
We could have, and just to give you an example of what an alternative could be, we could have a builder who would be allowed, of course, to build a building which is LEED certified if he wanted to, but he wouldn't have to. And if he felt that he could get higher rents because tenants want to live in those kind of buildings or to work in those buildings, the marketplace would dictate. And if this builder got to rent out his space because it was LEEDs, well, that's the market speaking. But instead, we have a regulation that ends up imposing a cost on a whole lot of tenants who never got to have a vote.
That's right. So I have one other comment I'd like to make.
Of course, Drake. Go ahead.
So I'm not working in architecture anymore. Now I'm a dog walker, so that really worked out well. And I do most of my walking up in the East Bay Regional Parks, which basically run the entire eastern strip of Oakland and Berkeley and San Leandro and Castro Valley. And you can't build beyond they basically have this barrier to building by buying all the land on top of the ridge and just to the east of the ridge. And what I found out they're doing is they're buying land for sub-market value, sub-market prices from people who can't build on the land that they've bought. So there's lots of people who have picked up, hundreds of acres to develop into residential communities, and then they get hit by this regulation wall, and they can't build on it. And so they've got this land that they've invested in, and they're losing money on it while since they're doing nothing. The East Bay Regional Parks Department comes in and says, oh, we'll buy it for you, but for less than market value, because you need to get it somehow. You need to get your money back somehow. And so it's sort of like this eminent domain tactic that's being used to block people from being able to develop beyond a certain point.
Mimi, you are dying to say something to Drake. Go ahead, Mimi.
Yeah, I want to say, first of all, it's worse than eminent domain, because what happens is the people, and this gets back to the issue of open space, so I'd like to define that. The term open space is used to kind of get you off of what is really happening. Open space starts out as somebody's private property. That's the bottom line. And what happens is they ask people, do you like open space? And of course people say, yeah, I like open space. And so what happens is in California, there's something called ballot box planning. And ballot box planning allows a city or a county to put a measure on the ballot for property that they don't own. So let me give you an example of what happened out in Alameda County. It was called Measure D in 2000. They put a measure on the ballot. They asked, there's 1.2 million people in Alameda County. They asked them to vote on property that's owned by maybe less than 1,000 people. And of course, it was no cost to the voters. They voted, yes, we want open space, quote unquote. And it was put into law. Now, it turns out that this was put out by the Sierra Club and by Jerry Brown. They did not want to pay for the property. I have a rancher out in Livermore who can't even, the property's been in his family for 5 generations. He cannot put a home on the property for his son. And I've got another equestrian center that's in the East Bay Hills and on Crow Canyon Road. He wants to add some extra area on his private property for his horses to run a covered arena, and he can't do it because there's actually a limit on how much space on his property he can put a building. And nobody paid for that property. And I had an Alameda County supervisor tell me to my face that that was fine because the people voted on it. And well, you don't vote on private property. And all of these owners now are stuck. They kind of are in this space where they can't do much with their property. And so, yeah, there's a fire sale.
And this is, Drake, this happens often enough that there is a phrase for it. It is called regulatory taking. It is where regulations are adopted that so limit the use of your property, it is worthless to you. And the significance of regulatory taking is that it is not eminent domain. If it was eminent domain, you would have to be paid if the government took your property.
Great.
But if the government says you only can use this as a pond for koi fish, and that's all you can do, that the property is worthless to you, but the government doesn't pay you for the loss in value. So, Drake, you raise a very important issue, and I very much appreciate your calling the show. Thank you so much.
Thank you.